Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are going to be looking at a Paldea Evolved based build of Lugia Archeops, one of the most successful archetypes since its release, and it continues to gain new support, including from this set. There's several new special energy that we can get from Paldea Evolved that can all be useful in Lugia. I think specifically the ones we'll be looking at today are Therapy and Jet Energies, as these combine to really help the Thumping Snorlax become a really powerful single prize beat stick in the deck and really sort of change the trajectory of Lugia, whereas right now it has the V-Stars themselves and then looks to the likes of Tyranitar and Urshifu to be high damage output multi-prize threats. We're going to go down an avenue which is much more single prize based, slightly lower damage output, but with still some burst potential. So let's have a look at these energy in a bit more detail then. The Therapy energy removes status conditions from us. So if we're sleeping, confused, or paralyzed, simply attaching this Therapy energy removes that status. Or if we would fall asleep or whatever else and have a Therapy energy attached, we will no longer. So that means we can freely thump with our Snorlax and not have any issues there. Similarly, we have the Jet Energy, which is a fantastic special energy from this set, which we can take full advantage of here. When you attach this from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon, switch that with your active Pokemon. So Lugia doesn't currently play any switch cards, oftentimes has to tech Penny or Thornton. Now we immediately gain a space by having these fantastic Jet Energies in the deck, but they have so much great upside. It's another way we can stop our Snorlax from napping. It's a great way that we can try and protect Lugia in the opening stages. If we are, for example, going second and have started a Lugia, we'd much rather throw a single prize Pokemon into the active position. Or if we're looking to use Read the Wind, possibly, and haven't started Lugia, we could jet onto a Lugia, bring it into the active for that discard energy. So helps smooth out our opening turn or two based on what our opponent's trying to do against us, which I think is fantastic. Iono is the obvious upgrade that pretty much every deck is going to be going for. Currently, Lugia is playing Judge, and now we get to play a supporter which draws us more cards in the opening stages, which is amazing, and can be even more disruptive in that late game, so I think it's a fantastic upgrade. Pretty much every deck will be making that upgrade, but it's really helpful for Lugia when we're so combo-based to have extra cards in the opening turn or two is just massive for us just to play the game, because we are quite setup dependent on those first couple turns. Luxray is another fantastic single prize option this deck gains. It has the ability Vibrant Flash, which allows us to put it directly onto the bench, even though it's a stage 2 Pokemon usually, once we're behind on prize cards. So if that ever happens, we can put down the Luxray, immediately search out Reversal Energy, another special energy from this set, and attach it to our Luxray, and straight away we can pay for the cost of Wild Charge, which is 180 damage, and we do deal 20 damage to ourselves, but of course this is a Lightning-type Pokemon, so it's great in mirror match situations, it's great against Paldea VSTAR in Chien-Pao decks, potentially, and seeing as though this isn't a basic Pokemon, we now have an easy answer to Flying Pikachu VMAX as well, which is also worth noting. The Reversal Energy can also be attached to Archeops as well, so don't sleep on that combination that's now possible in this deck. Taking a look at the 60 then, you'll definitely see the sort of shift here, where we remove all the single strike Pokemon and energy and go much more towards a single prize attacking route with the double Snorlax, the Luxray, and we also, of course, can continue to attack with Archeops themselves much more freely now, because we have so many more special Colorless energy in the deck list. We are also playing Wyrdeer V, which is probably a card I'll have to remind you of. It hasn't really seen too much competitive play, but it suits this deck very well for being some higher damage output, which we can kind of lack at times when you cut all the single strike Pokemon. However, Wyrdeer can be that big burst of damage. You have 40 damage for each energy attached to the Wyrdeer, and it can yoink lots of energies itself. This is another great card, thanks to Jet Energy in part, because it means we don't even have to pay retreat from any of our Pokemon. We can simply bench the Wyrdeer, jet into the active, then yoink with the Frontier Road ability, and suddenly we have that higher damage output at our disposal, which is pretty massive. It's really helpful because Snorlax is quite an efficient attacker. If you're just pulling out DTE plus like Therapy or whatever else just to be thumping, you then have your second Primal Turbo, which can be sort of littering energy around your board, knowing that at some point in the game you can sort of steal them all for yourself as Wyrdeer to get a big knockout on some multi-prize Pokemon. We are also playing Drapion. It's of course helpful against Mew, and we have cut the T-Tars, so we want some dark type coverage. But of course, we can also power this up with our Archeops if we want to trade into Gardevoir EX as well. So the Drapion is definitely a helpful card. I feel like having Snorlax and healing at your disposal is really nasty against Lost Zone, to be honest with you. That's a big reason why I feel like this could be a contender in the format, is that having the unfazed Fat on Snorlax and that higher damage output as well as high hit points, just a really awkward combination for Lost Box, and having the Serena means that you can continually heal your other Pokemon like your Archeops or whatever, so your opponent can't do the Greninja plus Sableye combination to knock them out too easily. And the Serena is also going to be very helpful against Ting Lu EX as well from the new Paldea Evolved set, which is looking to turn off your Archeops and turn off possibly even your Lugia in the opening stages. So Serena can heal those guys, so you will continue to be able to use those abilities. So it seems to be a pretty important card. Outside of that, we gain the spaces by not being a single prize deck of playing Earn. So we just play the Bull Search for our item cards, a pretty straightforward supporter line where we cut the judges and also no longer have the need for Penny or Thornton. So we'll just play 3 copies of Iono. And we are playing 2 Mesagoza and 2 Collapsed. That's mostly because, like I said, we want to be as single prizey as possible. So having the double Collapsed means we can use our fish in the opening stages to get that Burnet or get that research and still get rid of it quite easily. Or we can tank hits with Lugia and collapse them away as well. So that's the main prerogative here. The special energy is pretty straightforward and streamlined. The therapies obviously help you smack with Snorlax. The gifts are still massive in the deck, and I like having 3 copies because, again, more single prize based, more opportunities for the gift to come clutch for us. And in an Iono based format, these are really important cards. Onto some other options. Zinnia's Resolve is an interesting one. I have seen this in a number of Japanese lists, just because sometimes you can be in that awkward middle ground where you don't want to research away a key piece, like your 1 copy of Reversal Energy or your Luxray, if you're not yet behind non-prize cards, so can't simply bench it. Or sometimes just getting rid of too many DTE then makes Wyrdeer less effective, etc. So having a Zinnia's Resolve still gives you that discard fodder if you want to get rid of Archeops in the opening stages and can still draw a decent number of cards. Honestly, there's so much VIP pass in this format that I feel like Zinnia's gets a decent amount of value quite often, so it's a pretty reasonable one-off to have in the deck. Radiant Charizard could be another single prize attacker entering the list. Its Excited Heart ability means that we can take advantage of the new Luminous energy quite well. If we simply just attach a Luminous to the Charizard, it then fulfills the cost of Fire Energy. The awkward downside of Luminous Energy is that if we ever attach other special energy, it then turns into a Colorless energy card. So you probably would have to play like a 1 Luminous, 1 Charizard package, similar to the Luxray package that we're playing right now, and it's not something that I'm really a huge fan of. And then Pumpkaboo currently isn't in the deck list. We are still playing full stadium, so still a decent amount of bounces to that path in the opening stage. But also, because this list is so much more based on attacking with Snorlax, we have 4 double turbo energies, so we can naturally attack with Snorlax even under path. Even if we don't have that summoning style, we can still be putting pressure on with that Snorlax in the opening stage, or simply finding double turbo means we can attack with our Lugia and remove path and hope that we can summon on a following turn. Still a little bit risky, and if you are expecting a number of path-based decks, I think the Pump could easily make its way back into this list. Onto the matchups then, and there is a glaring weakness of the new Colorless approach of Lugia, and that is that Skyscraper says no. We actually have no way of getting around Duraludon VMAX at all. We don't even try to. We're not even mucking around with the likes of Cancelling Clone or Path of the Peak ourselves. It just doesn't seem worthwhile in a Colorless build. You could try and sort of wait around to try and get a Wyrdeer combo plus Path to get 1 KO, but it really feels too difficult, and I feel like if you want to play a Lugia list that does have answers to Dura, you got to continue to play the single strike approach. That's just how it is. And then also with this single prize build, you don't have that higher damage output to deal with Miraidon very effectively, and you no longer have any good fighting type coverage, so I feel like that matchup could be getting slightly weaker. I'm not too worried about Miraidon per se, so it's not really a matchup that I'm too afraid of. It really does come down to that Duraludon being the more awkward one. Against your Guardian, your Lost Box, you can be very one prize based, and this Snorlax is so annoying to deal with, especially for the Lost Zone players, so I feel like those should be pretty reasonable. Mew and Arctina are also fairly awkward. You have to, play around their paths and whatnot in the opening stages, but I'm expecting a small drop-off of the amount of Judge in some of these lists, so I do think that could be somewhat helping you, as getting hit with Path Iono is far less dangerous than Path Judge in the opening stages. Ting-Lu should be pretty okay, seeing as though we have the healing of the Radiant Tsareena and also a natural resistance on the Lugia. It's just really difficult for Ting-Lu to actually get over Lugia, so you can just slowly pound them down, essentially. Chien-Pao is pretty okay. You have a mixture of single prizes and multi-prizes to sort of keep up with them, so I think that's more of a racing matchup, but at least you have Gift Energy Iono at your side, so I feel like that should be pretty okay. And then the Lost Dragon matchups, the Goodra and the Tina, I think these are both kind of fine. These will certainly be matchups where your Wyrdeer is going to be important, because we don't have naturally high damage outputs until we use our Wyrdeer, so saving that combo for getting through a Goodra or getting through Giratina are going to be the sort of crucial moments in those games. Now, despite Lugia getting a bunch of shiny new toys from Paldea Evolved, there's still nothing wrong at all with the single strike build, and if you do just want to play a very streamlined Paldea 60 for the single strike Lugia, you can simply sub out Judges as well as the Penny from current builds and add in 3 copies of Iono and flip-flop a Gift Energy and a V-Guard towards Jet Energy, so now the deck has internal switching options and gains the better supporter of Iono to have Disruption and higher cards in the opening stages when you are forced to use this supporter rather than hitting your Research or Burnet or whatever. It at least is a card that can still cycle and get you sort of into the game. On to the closing thoughts then. This Colorless build has done very well in smaller tournaments in Japan, but I know that the West is quite different in how they treat Duraludon. It feels like we've seen a lot of Duraludon. It won the EUIC and has continued to do well in Lugia builds and Arc builds over the last few regionals, so I would definitely be a little bit hesitant to build this going into the NAIC, but possibly some smaller tournaments. I feel like this could definitely be an option for you, where you just have to kind of dodge and weave one of those fringe matchups, I would say. Arctura not really being super popular right now, probably like not in the top 5 of popularity, so I think sometimes you can get away with it, but the big upside is that you're just better into the single prize matchup. So if you think the format is going towards lots of Guardian, lots of Lost Box, that's where you want to be. You really want to be playing this Colorless build because it can react quite nicely to those decks in format, can certainly race them quite effectively, and has a number of single prize threats that can be difficult for some of these builds to overcome. A final note on Lugia then is that Gift Energy is just very good in general in a format where Iono is a factor. We also have onboard acceleration from Archeops, so even if Gift Energy somehow is gotten around by Iono plus Sinnoh combos, we at least have Archeops which can power up something to attack with. So we're never going to be completely out of options, because we can at the very least swing with the Archeops themselves. We naturally deck thin with the card as well, which is great, so even if you are being hit with Iono, if it is, turn 4 or 5, you've probably thinned all your energy, so you're naturally just drawing into like the remaining cards of your Bull Search and then just other supporters that you still have in deck. So I feel like this deck naturally handles Iono better than most in format, which is always boding well for Lugia and is always something you should be factoring in with your deck choice. Let me know your thoughts down below. Will the Colorless build of Lugia hit the ground running, or is it going to be kept at bay by Duraludon? As I've already mentioned, Lugia players themselves have played Dura in the past, so that could be a counter coming back into the deck list if the Colorless build ever sees too much popularity. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below on Lugia. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow for another one. Cheers.